Yo, 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 yo! We got the boy Shaun. Actually, no. Can we actually say your real street name?
No. What's my real name?
Dr. Daddy! we got Dr. Daddy.
As far as nicknames go, it's pretty cool.
That's a great nickname.
It's so good.
Great nickname. And for 2019, the streets knew you as Dr. Daddy.
That
was
true.
a widely
That is-
accepted
that is-
term.
I
that
remember
is
running
true.
around Melville and just like walking down, and then girls on the other side of the street being like, "Oh, it's Dr. Daddy!" It's like that would be the greatest moment of my life.
Yeah. By the way, it's Daddy with like a Z. It's DZADDY, not just
Yeah.
Daddy. It's Zaddy. So
Best kind of spelling.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got Dr. Daddy, Mr. Shaun, or rather Dr. Shaun de Fonseca here with us, an old pal who was flown in from South Africa, particularly for this podcast.
Exactly.
Came for no
That's
other
the
reason
thing, yeah.
except to be on the Mind Your Business podcast. And we're excited to have you.
Phenomenal.
We're excited you're here. We love you. You look handsome.
Likewise.
Your skin's glowing. What is that, mocha?
Oh, yeah.
Got a
maybe.
mocha skin
Maybe,
tone.
yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Big fan. So we've got to ask a question initially, just to kick things off. And this one is like sentimental meets freaky. Depends how you want to take it.
Ooh.
So I'm going to give the question. I'm going to let you run with it, okay?
This is how you guys start?
Yeah. Let your mind do what it wants. Casting couch.
Just so everyone can know a little bit more about you.
Yeah.
You know? And maybe our friendship.
Here we go. Dr. Shaun Daddy de Fonseca, what's the weirdest or most random moment that felt totally insignificant at the time, but now feels iconic to our friendship, considering that we've been friends for 17 years?
Yeah.
Ooh. Yo, this is really a tough one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it didn't feel particularly insignificant at the time, but you know, it felt like just like a brief moment in time. There was a plate holiday. I can't tell you the year.
There were quite a few pet
Yeah,
holidays.
there were quite a few. I can't tell you which
Yes.
one. But there was like a moment when we went to Robert 5 at 5.
Yes.
We did the morning thing.
Oh,
Fairly confident you were there.
I think I came. Is that when we hitchhiked?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
What the hell was that?
And it was just like one of those, you know, the day after New Year's, we're like, you know, I don't know, late teens, or on the beach together, 5 a.m. All gross. There are a couple of pictures that still exist about it.
Yeah,
So it
they
was
are.
actually- there's a
one of with Kanye.
There's a photo of Shaun and Kanye
like pissing in the ocean.
pissing in the ocean.
So yeah,
That's
that
a video of Kanye going, "We in blood." so funny.
was ages ago, and I think like still like earlier days in our friendship.
Yeah, that was
but
ages
like
ago.
that's a sort of memory that stands out. It's just like
That is
that
such
sort
a
of-
beautiful moment. That's
Yeah,
actually
like,
such
yeah.
a that's such
So
a good
cute.
one.
That's a really good one.
That is a really good one. I've got one.
I also
Yeah,
have
yeah.
one.
as well, actually. And significant moment or insignificant moment. I've actually got two, but I'll do this more significant moment.
Go on,
There was
old boy.
there was a point because, like, for context, it's there's the three of us, and then there's Nkanyiso and Gordon. And we all went on this Thailand trip together, and it was so much fun. It was
We said we'd never talk about
we
it.
did never talk about it. It's phenomenal. And there was one of, I think
I've never seen it.
What's going on here?
His eyes are dancing left and right in the room.
I'm not talking about that. Come on.
What? I'm not talking about, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, what? But there was a point where I think it was like our last day on KPP, and we're on that boat, and we're traversing through like the Thai sea.
But where I nearly lost my life.
Yes, that one.
Okay.
Yeah. We
Tell me how
we
this sort of
almost died.
magnificent moment
But
for you.
you'd perked up by then, you know,
that's
and
true.
we were all just dancing on the boat. And I remember sitting there, I was like having a beer and having a drag of my cigarette, and all you guys were dancing, and Kanye and Gordon were in it, and just the whole
that
boat
was
was
so
just
lovely.
focused on our group of mates. And I was
so
like,
lovely.
this is
Oh my
this is
God.
one of the, like, when I'm 80 years old, I'll look back at
My heart is literally smiling right now from that comment.
That was a
such good
really,
feeling.
really strong
That
one.
was
Like
so
that,
good.
as you said
Such a
that,
good
I like felt that like memory.
Felt
you know,
that.
like that
You know
was-
what is equal to that moment for me, at least?
Yeah.
Was that night we had just got the villa
Oh, in Karen Beach.
in Karen Beach.
Karen Beach. Yeah.
Then we decided to go have dinner at some literal hole in the wall, like it was some woman's house.
I remember that house.
And we were like, fine, let's just eat here.
Yeah.
We got around this little nook, this little table. She came to us. She was a very like homely type of woman, and you know, kind of mother energy. And she said, "What do you guys want to eat?" And she gave us the options. And she was like, "You know what? I'll bring you a bunch of stuff. Tell me what you like." Brings out this array of food, and we proceeded to have, till this day, probably one of the greatest dining and eating experiences of my life.
That was phenomenal.
Till this day.
I remember.
And that was the first time I had mango sticky rice.
And
it changed my view of desserts and cuisine forever.
Phenomenal.
And that was a magnificent, beautiful, amazing day that I'll never forget.
Like that moment in time.
A moment in time was amazing. And we bonded, we chatted, we laughed so much. That was a sweet time for us.
That was a
And then we kissed, and then we obviously
Damn, bro. Okay, wait. Why do I not remember anything from that moment on? You guys put something
you
in
went
my...
there, sorry. Oh, Sean. Oh, sorry.
But like on that note, let's go straight into the buddy pod.
Yes.
Bada boom.
Mind your goddamn business.
You all may be wondering why we've brought a doctor onto our pod, which is unique because doctors don't usually start things. Doctors only form part of things, either hospitals, practice groups. Doctors aren't really the most entrepreneurial people. Keep me honest here, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Doctors aren't usually the most entrepreneurial people there are in the world. They tend to be, because being a doctor is a calling, an invocation, if you will, they tend to be so dedicated to the helping and treatment of individuals and people that they don't really go out for this kind of profit-building type thing that you would expect from an entrepreneur traditionally. However, we have a very unique one in our friend, Mr. de Fonseca, which makes him so lovely and unique, in that he has ventured out. Hence why we thought it would be a fantastic opportunity to get him on the pod to speak a little bit about that, the trials, tribulations, successes, failures. But before that, can you give us a bit of color on who you are, where you come from, what your vibe is?
Bit of the story.
Give us some meat
You're
on
an
the bone.
expert in the medical field in
The good doctor.
in South Africa. You've done phenomenal things, particularly in Johannesburg, but all over SA. So maybe some context. on
Beaufort.
who you are.
Yeah. What?
Beaufort?
Beaufort
Beaufort West.
Yeah. This job has taken me far. Expert is generous. Thanks. I'll take that.
No. I hope you're an expert.
I'm Dr.
I've
Shaun.
come to you for so many medical issues. I am very expert.
I'm Dr. Shaun de Fonseca. I'm a
Pretty pretentious for you to say doctor. When
I mean, it's part of my name now, right? This is I'm a doctor working out of the East Rand in Joburg currently. Studied medicine.
Shout out East Rand.
Yeah, that's where you're from. It's rough out there.
It's rough out there.
Anyone listening, don't go to the East.
Studied medicine at Wits in Johannesburg. Very long.
Witswaterstrand.
Yeah, very long degree that was.
What does that mean, Witswaterstrand?
White water's rand, like so.
Of course it's
like
white.
white water. I have no idea what that has to do with Joburg.
White
What does it have to do with?
White water's edge.
That's a tough one.
Is it?
That's a tough one. I don't know.
Is it like what? Must have been.
What
Like,
does it matter?
oh, yeah, fair enough.
No, I'm kidding.
It's called Wits now. But
Yeah,
yes,
that's probably.
yes,
I mean,
let's
they
just
go
with
by
that.
Wits.
Yeah.
Studied at Wits. Graduated like around 2017. I've worked all over Joburg, in the state sector. Yeah.
So just to touch on that, I don't think people understand how difficult it is to become a doctor in South Africa. Like,
It's hard.
it's really hard.
And I mean, because if you study for 17 years, and then once you're 45, you eventually come out of the university, and then you have to do your Zuma year, which is like the year where you have to go somewhere random, essentially.
Explain that. Explain that to
Yeah.
people.
So it's
Because that's what doesn't exist in the UK, for example.
I think it does exist in the UK.
No, it doesn't.
Not.
No, you do like a, if you call it like an internship type year where you pay
Yes.
very little, but it's not like a year where you're going out to rural areas because they're underserved to provide that
Okay.
service.
So
that
that's
might be a
unique.
bit more unique to us.
Yeah.
So we have like the typical post-graduation formative years, which we in South Africa call internship, right? That's a set of 2 years that you do after you've graduated in mostly like in academic settings where there are seniors enough to like sort of provide coverage, but also put you in a setting where you can grow and like really develop and turn from the medical student into doctor, right?
Yeah.
And that's a standard requirement before you can work independently in South Africa. We have that.
Yes.
That I think most medical schools around the world might have that or
Yeah.
a similar system.
Yeah.
What's unique to South Africa is the community service element.
Yes.
There probably are countries, but like sort of don't quote me strictly on this that also have this, but we have it as a very sort of set thing where if you don't finish that year, you cannot work in the independent or private sector in South Africa.
What do you mean if you don't finish that year? As in, if you don't do that year,
If
you cannot do it. Okay.
I mean, you could carry on working in the state sector, but you can't register for independent practice in South Africa. It's like the final stepping stone.
I quite like it.
I love it, actually.
I think it's probably a hack, you know, like you grew up in Johannesburg, you're a big city guy, and they say, okay, you're off to Kimberley, you know, like
exactly
it's a bit of a bummer.
my experience.
Sure.
That was that
but
was
good, because people in Kimberley need doctors, you know. So
fair enough, but do they need me?
I'm kidding. They do,
of
Sean.
course they do. That
They
sounds
need a
terrible. That sounds really
They
terrible.
also need a Dr. Zaddy.
So I did my internship years at Chrisani Baragwana. It's a very, very well-known sort of hospital, massive hospital in the Southern Hemisphere. Difficult setting to sort of really you sort of come into your own. And then after completing
But
those
hang on,
two,
sorry, before you carry on, this is cool. But if you, how much of your Hippocratic oath can you break on this podcast to tell us stories that happened
All of it.
during your? I'd like to press for like the grosser stuff or the crazier stuff, but I just want to know what you're allowed to.
Yeah, I think the grosser stuff, scary stuff is very like sort of, you know, social setting stories. You know, I always feel a little bit sort of like a little bit like sort of like in a challenging spot telling these stories. Like these are people, you know, these are people in people's lives.
Yes, Nick, they're human beings.
Yeah, these are like like really terrible experiences. You know, like,
If you're listening for like some
gore.
some gore, you're not going to get it today.
Put on
maybe on the BTS. So like you know, like
we'll put it on the Patreon. So carry on. So yes, you were going.
After completing those 2 very difficult years at Chrisani Baragwana, went off to, you know, one of these more rural areas. I very optimistically applied to work in the Western Cape, and I got that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But
not the
Western
one you
Cape's a
wanted.
very large province. For those who know. Ended up in Beaufort West, which is like dead center in the middle of the country.
Yes.
Where people go to disappear, basically.
Yeah.
Or die.
It's one of those places you drive by. You know,
You don't stop in there.
At least in how we would have grown up, you know, we wouldn't be very familiar with stopping there and being very familiar with that sort of setting.
Because you know in White Lotus season 3, and they're talking about Thailand.
I don't want any.
Yeah,
Oh, you haven't
bro.
seen it?
Yeah. I mean, neither.
What?
It's like, yeah.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
I'm on like episode 4.
I think you would have covered this already.
Okay.
Actually, it's not a
not
make
big
or break. But the one lady says the only people who come to Thailand, who live in Thailand, are
seen this,
what's it, tax cheats and murderers. I feel like that's the people that go to Beaufort West.
Crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
Trust me, I met a lot of people there. There's more than tax cheats and murderers. there are legitimate communities out there, like very, very, very lovely people.
You're just trying to belittle everyone to like the nub of a human being.
I think you're a little bit out of touch, Nick. I think you're being here too long.
I'm just saying Beaufort West is quite a random place to exist, you know, like it's
yeah. So that was, you know, sort of that was like one of the big adjustments in my sort of growing up and more sort of like formative years was adjusting to work in that setting from that year.
because they must have been exposed to so much, right? Like you were probably like one of the few doctors in a hospital where lots of people need help.
So I think exposure-wise, I wouldn't say it was too much more than I was like already familiar with. Sorry about that.
Especially
but one of the biggest sort of adjustments was I'd gotten like all of the big exposure at Baragwana, to be honest with you. It's hard to go through that setting and not see almost everything.
But what I'm thinking is like it's like a big hospital in a big city where there's a lot more support. Whereas if you go into a small town hospital, it might be more difficult, or not the case.
So this is where that part comes in. It's not necessarily seeing more, but it was what I'm exposed to and what is expected of me. You know, I go from pipsqueak doctor to you're the
guy.
doctor. Like,
Yeah.
Now
The main
that
guy.
decision rests with you. And big adjustment stuff.
And making big decisions, I'd imagine.
Totally. You know, and again, you're going from a place where you're making decisions, like sort of checking on your seniors, like, hey, can I do this? Can I do this?
Yes.
To now making decisions that impact people's lives and well-being, you know, this is like stuff that's lifelong. Wow. It's kind of serious stuff. Sorry, I know that's not the tone of the podcast. So.
No, that's exactly.
That's exactly.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and there was something important to add. Sorry. This also happened to coincide with the very big sort of thing that happened, like, you know, globally was COVID, the COVID pandemic.
You were there during COVID, eh?
It was just as I got there, sort of everything started
Shut
shutting
down.
Yeah.
So you were there basically one man, eh?
You know, moved to a totally new sort of location, very far out, what we would call rural setting in South Africa, to sort of do this like very sort of challenging job, like new sort of elements of the job, and the world shuts down.
Can I add a point though on that?
Yeah.
Why I think it's even particularly more difficult for someone like you is that like Shaun is a very social person. He thrives in like social scenarios, and ability to like have a drink with a friend.
You don't get a
have
nickname like
boogie.
Dr. Zaddy by being an introvert.
That's a fair point, my friend.
Yeah.
And as a social person, in a situation like COVID, and on top of that, it's like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times worse than the experience could have been, for example, if you were maybe doing it in Johannesburg or mainland.
I would say
Cape Town.
totally. Yeah, my experience of it, I think, sort of, at least for me, it felt a little bit more intense and a little bit more amplified than what someone else might have felt.
Damn.
Very subjective, probably a heavy bias as well. But yeah, I sort of felt like I'm the city slicker, very social and outgoing guy. Move away.
City
Everything
slicker,
gets shut down.
jeez. Calls himself that.
I don't know. Is
City
it like the
slicker.
70s?
But that whole moment was massive. Like, especially, obviously, we all stay in contact no matter where we are in the world,
Yeah.
And I remember speaking to you about that, and because that was kind of a point of COVID where everyone was like, "It's not a thing, it's fake." You know what I mean? But then you'd be like, "The beds are full."
I was like,
like,
this is
yeah,
very
you
real,
were
guys.
always
Like
kind
this is. I do remember this call. I think you remember. I remember you saying like, "This is not going to be a thing. This is like definitely going to like blow over tomorrow." And I think I remember not being so convinced. But yeah, I think for a while my experience of it was just so far removed from what people were actually sort of coming to
You were at the front
understand
lines.
literally.
Yeah.
As Francis like,
Phenomenal.
as far
Damn.
as
So
I could
you've basically earned your stripes, and you can full-fledged, wholeheartedly, full chest say that you are now an established doctor that's been through the kind of trenches, if you will.
very comfortably.
Yeah.
Like, to touch on very briefly,
Yeah.
not like to go on too long about it. Like, came back to Joburg once I completed this very difficult year, and COVID was carrying on. Sort of like it came in sort of waves with how serious it was. And this was around the time of the Delta variant. Worked at a very sort of renowned private hospital in Johannesburg. Now that I was allowed to do that at Mill Park Hospital, particularly working in this sort of area, with COVID patients. Very, very challenging and sort of taxing job that was.
Can you imagine?
Again, I think just over a year prior to that, I was baby doctor. Had to like do this very rapid sort of growing up and do the same, even more so when moving back to Joburg. So yeah, it was a sort of a series of very challenging tasks. Asked a lot of me to grow up very quickly, and I think I've done that.
I think you've done well.
Phenomenal.
Great job.
Someone who, you're 45 years old. I'm joking.
He's got a fantastic
Shaun is 32 years old.
Yeah, 32 years old.
And you've accomplished so much already just in that medical field. But then you looked at starting this business in Joburg.
Yeah, I will add to that just before we get on to that.
Yes.
Shaun comes from a lineage of doctors,
That's
Yes.
correct.
which
That
is actually
correct.
rare for people. Both parents
Yeah,
are doctors.
Yeah.
that is
It's in your
correct.
DNA.
That is
Yeah,
correct.
your
That is
father
correct.
was a brain surgeon,
Yeah, that's correct.
is that
Neurosurgeon.
right?
Yeah, he's a neurosurgeon.
and your mom's, I think, GP, but she's
a
quite
GP. She's a GP.
advanced in the game, the GP
she's-
game. So that's unique.
Yeah.
And was that like imposed on you from a young age because you come from a family of doctors? Or?
Very interesting question. So people often ask me this, like, "Hey, was this the expectation?" Honestly, no, not at all. Like, maybe
There was something there, because even when we were at like high school, you're like, I'm going to get good marks, I'm going to go to a university, and I'm going to become a doctor.
No, those are two
and like from
different
like,
things,
hey,
that could be his ambition, but I'm asking.
yeah.
Were his parents like, yo, this is what's going to happen?
Or you're saying pushing it upon him.
Yeah.
I get you.
And,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly it.
You
You're
seem to
100%
be
correct.
questioned,
And I
Nicola.
believe
Yes,
that
okay.
was always the route I was going to take.
Yes.
But by no means was that put on me or asked of me. It was just what I took to, probably because it's what I was most familiar with and understood, what was around me.
Yeah.
So
No, sure.
yeah.
It was
Initially, I actually wanted to be a rapper, to be honest with you. I wanted to make music.
and then you let everyone down by becoming a doctor.
I wanted to make music. I remember having this conversation with my mother. I wanted to sort of make music. I know it sounds like a joke. I really wanted to make music.
So I can imagine.
Shaun is
I
such a
try,
good
but-
singer. It will stun you.
Crazy.
You're
Can you
such
sing
a
for us
complex
right
guy.
now?
Please
generous.
bellow out.
Not a chance in hell, but that is generous, and I appreciate it.
Could you create our theme tune for this podcast?
Yeah.
Let's try. We'll
Okay.
try.
Mama rolling that body.
R. Kelly, bro. Sorry, just take
It's a hardback to our previous episode.
Okay.
We had a whole segment on R. Kelly. Don't even ask us.
Yeah.
Don't even ask us about that.
Storm
is over. Storm is over.
I'll tell you. So I remember having this conversation with my mother, motherfucker. That was aggressive. And I told her I wanted to be a rapper, and she said, "You're not a good singer."
No,
right?
I'm not.
Okay, cool.
I was in the choir though, to be fair. That's just how low the standard was.
I don't know. Yeah, like that was. You were very proud of that as well. You're very proud.
I don't think I was very proud of it. Let's not get too excited about it.
I mean,
I joined the choir to get on the England trip, and then they cut me.
It's about 20 years later.
So I wasn't that cheat about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure.
So you were saying about R. Kelly?
I don't even know what. No, I don't even know where we are. Yeah. Anyway, my mother helped me make that decision and saying like I told her I wanted to do music. Like, I actually legitimately wanted to have quite a few friends that are in the music industry, and she very kindly said to me, "Well, I'll pay for your medical school."
Oh, that's sweet of her.
And that left it there. No,
sure.
I'll only pay for your medical school.
Yes, okay.
Like, if you want to do music,
got it.
Cool.
Oh, I thought she was doing something else. Okay, got it. She was like,
oh, if you want to, medicine, I'll cover you.
Yes.
And left it there. And I sort of took that. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess
So that answers, I think, your question with regards to whether or not that was asked or expected of me. Like,
yes.
I think there was some degree of, hey.
Did your parents do that thing? Because it happens sometimes. I think my mom did it. There's nothing prescriptive per se as to like, you're going to be a lawyer, but there's like a framing of, and a very subtle framing over many years. For example, being like, you'll watch like, I don't know, Clinton on the television, and obviously he's a lawyer, and my mom would be like, lawyers, they speak so well, so eloquent, and often they hold senior positions in government. And like, you're like, oh, my parents like this guy. And eventually with time...
You kind of slowly indoctrinate
to be a lawyer. And then eventually you become, by virtue of just like tacit and implicit like programming.
Yeah, that was so well put, like, so well put as you. Yeah, I think my entire life, because I had came from a lineage of doctors, not just my parents, would come from like aunts, family.
Oh, there's more?
People I know. Yeah, people would be like, "Oh, he's so smart. He's probably going to be a doctor."
That's the one. Yeah,
it was never asked of me at all. But there was sort of just was some framing, quite a
But that is quite interesting because if I look at
journalism, journalism.
Well, I mean that's what I was about to say. So it's quite interesting. So both your parents are doctors, and then it's obviously like the genetic skill sets that you get from your parents, along with your own skill sets that you had yourself, would mean you became a doctor. My mother was a journalist. My aunt was a journalist. We had half my family are authors. So I feel like there was some part of me that was like, oh, this is quite cool. I see it in my family.
You're a stable of journalists
as well. Yeah,
you're a thoroughbred journalist.
I low-key am. So it's quite. So maybe there is something there in terms of how you develop. You want to emulate what your family does as well.
That's the word, emulate. Yeah,
emulate.
It felt like something necessary to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
So coming from this family of doctors, you and your mom, obviously, you guys are really close. For the most part, she was kind of point in terms of raising you. So she was always there, always around, always present. What made you want to venture into something with her? Do you think? 'Cause that's ultimately what you did.
Yeah. So after sort of doing this gig at Mill Park Hospital,
it was during Mill Park. Okay.
Yeah. So at the end of this, there was a sort of a transition period where I think I realized that working at night only, like that's not healthy.
Yeah.
I need to start to navigate or figure out how I'm going to sort of fit into this sector and how I'm going to work a little bit more independently, sort of govern my own sort of working hours, realize what my input could be, how I could do it best, and that was also...
That's a very deep entrepreneurial spirit, by the way. What you just kind of set out there was what a lot of entrepreneurs feel like. I think I can do this really well. I'm going to do this on my own. I feel like I can structure it better. I think I can figure it out, the kinks in this better. It's interesting that you had that, and then you kind of went out and did the damn things, or at least...
Yeah, well, it wasn't too difficult from there. Once I realized that sort of my input and the value that I can bring people, comes best in a setting where I'm sort of figuring out what problems are before trying to at least solve them at the highest level.
Yeah,
but it became very clear to me hey, I can actually do this job quite easily, and I don't have to. Doesn't require too much more input from me. I'm already a qualified doctor. I can work as a GP. So it's gone more into it's then shifted into general practice, which I was fortunate enough to come across a sort of setting that was requiring a doctor of my skill sets. in an area that is much needing like that sort of a doctor, and went into a setting where I work in a group practice. Not a very sort of sophisticated sort of setup with regards to the business element of it, because really I don't take care of the business element in that sort of job. It is we as a group of doctors, if it was all of us, would be
Dr. Obi.
partner. Yeah,
I love that. That sounds really good.
Yeah, hot fun, my friends.
would be partners in a
That's
sense, and
McGregor.
we would partner.
Really good.
That's-
Sorry, we haven't like
would part-
fanboying.
Yeah, we'd be partners in a
Simple
sense,
joke.
and we would partner then
Yeah.
with the business administrator, which is the Netcare group.
Yeah.
And they sort of administer the business element of it, and it allows me to sort of work in a setting where I don't necessarily have to address too much of the challenging business aspect, but do also get to do my job, you know, sort
Yeah,
of
the
like
fun
as
stuff.
best I can, the meaty stuff,
The meaty stuff.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
And then while doing this job, I realized that, you know, I've got a lot of room here to sort of do more.
you had time,
Exactly. Not too much is being asked of me. And a little idea was born, and sort of came from the idea that, like, look, my mother's a doctor working in a similar sort of work setup. I'm a doctor. We similarly qualified at this point. And with our combined skill sets, we could potentially create something that mirrors what we're doing now, but also take ownership of the business element of it all. And one of the big desires here was, I think, to sort of create something, I think, for my mother to have. You know, she's the like kind of lady that's done a lot for me. Sort of like worked.
Your mother's amazing.
Like
Yeah.
Actually a
absolutely
superwoman.
incredible
Yes.
lady. Absolutely.
Like Mother's
incredible
Days
woman.
are made for people like that.
Yes.
Truly,
Exactly.
truly, yeah.
Love you, Elaine.
So we sort of spitballed this idea, and like sort of it sounded exciting at the time. You know, sounded very much like something that was very much in reach. Didn't really require too much like input, or I'm not say input, but didn't quite require too much in reinventing the wheel,
Yeah.
redesigning.
Yeah.
You know, sort of we know the prerequisites.
Yeah,
we
you
have it.
You're almost just repackaging already what you do.
Precisely, and trying to turn it into something of our own. You know,
Yeah.
Whereas what we have now, yes, we have that in the way of job, but something of our own, and this is where that entrepreneurial sort of like desire, sort of urge came in.
Can I ask you about that?
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
just put a pin there and just close that tab to open later. What if, or rather, we've spoken about this before, about what do you actually want out of creating something? And I think what we went down the rabbit hole was like legacy. We have this like incessant, random, implicit,
Narcissistic.
Yeah, I don't know what
need
is
for legacy,
Machiavellian.
building something.
Yeah, like
yeah. No, sure.
You talked about having like brick and mortar on the ground with
Yes.
the schools that you build and contribute to, and I talked about like leaving a business, something that's like legacy.
Yes.
Did you have that, like a legacy sense, like deep down in your loins?
That was entirely
Oh.
where this came from. Like it was,
Oh,
it
well,
was,
you're
it was.
not-
It, look, we both have very sort of like, you know, sort of like easy. I won't say easy jobs, but we don't have to think too much about other than the work that we're doing, and like the returns are like healthy. You know, like it's like
good-
we have
yeah,
like
good
really
payday.
good like jobs. So it wasn't necessarily only like the only motivation wasn't necessarily like income. It was to have like, you know, sort of to
Yeah.
create something that is essentially ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fonseca practice GP.
Yeah.
Wow. Bless you.
Bless you. Wow, bro. Am I going to get
Doctor
sick
now.
now?
Yeah. Perfect timing, my man.
No, but that is amazing. It's so cool that you did that. And so, how did you find? So, from the beginning,
Beginning.
and in the beginning, I'm not entirely sure how it works. So, if you're a GP, you're a doctor, you join someone else's practice, as far as I understand, and then they kind of pay you a salary, or the what do you call it? Patients come in and they pay you out of pocket directly, and the GP takes a cut, or how does that work? From the
Okay,
get-go?
so like the income structure, like currently,
Yes,
like how
yeah.
So it would essentially be sort of. I hate the word commission based because it sounds like I'm sort of selling something.
Mercenary.
But it's like, yeah, so it would be all based on, so patient comes to see me, I claim from the medical aid, like, you know, sort of how much my services are worth in that instance, and that's where the money comes in. And then there's sort of the expense element is paying the service providers or business service providers like their share of that.
Sure. But I'm saying versus like starting up your own GP versus when so your mom or you working as a GP. So you essentially working for someone else who started up their own business, and then you work in that building, for example.
Oh, okay, like so in a partner setting. I think
Yes.
I'm understanding you correctly. In a partner setting, yeah. So that's similar to what I'm saying, where I would provide service, claim money, claim to like sort of get money for the service, and then pay back the sort of business owner, so to speak.
Yes.
You know,
So they'll take a cut.
Exactly. Yeah. Take a cut.
Sure.
Yeah.
100%. So if you were to start up your own practice, then you could get other GPs to work in that practice. You take that cut from them, and then the pot gets bigger.
Turns the structure like, you know, sort of totally like in favor of the other way. Exactly. Yeah. And now sort of I get to more than just like sort of how that income structure changes. Also, I get to like make these decisions, you know, like really like sort of like of how this business runs, how this practice runs, how we get to like sort of provide service and
And I wonder what sort of the overheads are with starting a business like that. So, for example, you need a venue, right? You need, you have to pay rent, whatever. But then there's obviously a lot of complicated equipment you probably need, even in a GP, I'd imagine, that can be incredibly expensive to start off. Or how does that work?
So this is where I think it's a little bit, if you imagine it, it's sort of like, I don't know if you guys play video games, but like free roam, right? You get to decide how this goes in general practice. It all depends on the kind of service you want to provide. So,
so if you want to be like an ENT specialist, for example, or is it just like general practice?
Too far.
That's
like next step.
Okay,
that's like next step. Oh, I see what you mean. Like in general practice, if I wanted to focus on like ENT patients, I probably could, but it would be limiting like what I could do for people quite a lot. I'd be limiting myself for what I could do for people like quite a lot. So it's more that like I could sort of dictate or govern the nature and the extent of the service I would like to provide to someone, where in this instance we could start off really bare bones, you know, not trying to provide too much of a setting where people come in for emergencies and you know, sort of very high level things. There are a set of standard requirements that you sort of have to have a practice. The expenses aren't insane in that regard. Like it's you could come in very, very bare bones in sort of providing the administrative end or like element to someone's healthcare. You know, there's a lot of like diagnosing, treating, and very sort of simple work that goes on that doesn't require too much expensive equipment. Requires mostly the know-how and the presence. Like you need to be there, like do it, the inputs. Yeah,
but, interesting.
So I think for our viewers and people who listen to this podcast, entrepreneurship can take many forms, and it's not only necessarily making novel, unique product or tech or app. Professionals like doctors, like lawyers, accountants, can start their own things, and that is still an entrepreneurial endeavor. I think a lot of people don't actually give that enough credence, the idea of that being deeply entrepreneurial, just someone who does something as a professional going out and doing it by themselves. So I think speaking to that is actually quite an important thing, and I think a lot of people need to know that. But in saying that, what would you view as the biggest massive headwinds that you faced that made it difficult to kind of get this off the ground or made it difficult to initiate?
Well, you have to establish yourself, you know, like you I can create anything, like I can create anything, but for it to exist as something that has value, that, you know, people sort of utilize.
But you mean like medicine is like pretty inelastic, right?
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like a GP. It's like you
once
can kind of
medical practice, it's a medical practice.
Yeah, no,
like
sure.
There's not. I can't get too adventurous with ideas and like sort of like how we sort of appeal to people to get off the ground.
Can you market? Are your doctors allowed to market?
You can. I think so. There's a degree of marketing that's like very, very sort of okay and like tolerated. It's definitely getting a little bit. People are getting a little bit adventurous now, I would say, with how that goes. And it actually, I would say,
what do they do?
And the health professionals.
We're here in mid-surgery.
People are getting a little bit adventurous with how they provide advertising their services, and that is actually regulated. There is actually governing bodies that says what you can and can't like market yourself as, and it's kind of getting broken now. Like people.
So I saw something the other day on this topic. It was interesting. I saw something the other day. This woman. She basically started up a TikTok where she would do dances while she was performing open surgery on people.
The American lady.
The American lady.
Yeah.
And one time she was doing one of her TikTok dances while she was performing brain surgery, and she botched this woman's brain surgery. then they look back at the table and like, dude, you're just doing TikTok dances whilst
But I mean, that's American healthcare in like the epitome of American healthcare.
Yeah. How insane is that, though?
Yeah. Do you think Now could have taken care of?
That's where Now would have stepped in. Why are you doing the Dougie whilst you're performing heart surgery? That's crazy.
I'm so glad we segued here because there's obviously some alignment between.
There's definitely synergy between me and my friend.
What you guys do, like, what do you think is from your analysis of Now? Like, what kind of value can that bring to your inpatient?
Like an immense amount of value. I think
by the way, he did not get prepped to say
we did.
This is completely.
I just came up with a question on the spot.
On the spot.
Yeah.
Off the
And I will say this, like, I'll preface, you have been asking me about like my sort of input about Now
I
for
really
a while.
For like 6 years.
And I haven't given you anything.
You haven't given me a nugget.
So this is my take. Yeah,
go on.
Incredible. To get him on a fly to London to get him on a podcast to give us
something.
Fly me to London, put a roof over my head.
Yeah, literally. How's this motherfucker?
Put me in the couch. Put me in the
Jesus Christ.
No, it's an incredible sort of service. I think a gap. I think is the biggest thing. It's just something that no one has thought of, and I think that there'd be a lot of fear from the medical sort of professional side to sort of see it as something potentially like that would open yourself up to more liability, so to speak, but not necessarily. That's exactly the opposite.
Literally,
if I'm understanding about how this works, it like sort of protects from very extensive litigation. And am I understanding this correctly?
You've really looked at
I've been paying attention to you. I don't engage with you like with
all those blue ticks aren't for nothing.
Exactly, bro. Exactly. I won't reply, but I'll engage. And yeah, it again, this is something then that incredibly sort of it's a gap that you're sort of establishing, creating a business within, but serves to protect number one patient. Obviously, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But where healthcare professionals sort of like come in is that it protects them too.
Exactly.
I think even if you didn't necessarily agree with the idea, you're still
it's literally favoring you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the pain point we're trying to address with Now. We came in thinking of the ecosystem, not just what we could benefit from directly dealing with patients per se or quote unquote customers, but how can we benefit the ecosystem at large, which includes the hospitals, which includes the doctors, which includes the nurses. How can we make their lives a lot easier in which they can practice a lot more freely and therefore a lot better?
Yeah.
And that was a huge cornerstone of what we developed.
Yeah.
And to see that being recognized and understood, like all things that are new and novel and unique, it takes a ramp up time, what I call a hockey stick effect. So at first it's going to be difficult for people to understand what it is, and they may battle with the idea and the concept. But over time, as people start adopting it, you get that shoot up where they go, wait a second, this is actually something that could be really helpful to me in my day to day. And that's exactly what we're trying to do.
I was quite impressed by that because I think I got the impression that you must have done a lot of research into it.
My God.
Also how doctors work with this, because the reality is doctors work with like looking over their shoulder. Like
defensive medicine.
Like defensive medicine. And
defensive medicine. Said this in the pod before.
Yeah.
And defensive medicine is not the best medicine.
Not the best medicine by far.
Not
it's
at
expensive.
All. Yeah.
It's tedious. It's not the best way to go about.
And it's I think like the biggest part, especially in my interest, is it affects patient outcomes. If there's delay because you're being defensive, that's going to affect someone's health. So that potentially serves to actually sort of enable.
Yeah,
there's a cushion there which allows the doctor to be less defensive,
and ultimately that's going to serve. Again, what you want, the patient, like you want, like sort of, it's a great idea. I have to say, I you're really loving this. You're like frothing.
You know what? Because this is exactly what we want to get across.
Yeah.
And you've as a doctor, you've hit the nail on the head. You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome idea. Yeah. I don't even know where we were.
It is amazing. I mean, that is incredible because I had doubts about it. I was like, well, this guy's spending a lot of time doing this thing. No, but obviously it's an incredible product. But to hear it from a doctor, out of the horse's mouth.
Out of the horse's mouth.
Phenomenal.
Very beautiful, handsome horse.
Yes.
So the headwinds of just the difficulty of actually establishing something from the ground up, working with your mom, did your aspect of your mom have an issue in terms of creating this business? Because I know obviously working with family can be tough at times, especially with the parent who may not be as close to the way things are done in more recent times and may be more out of touch. How was that?
So what really sort of like, sort of as businesses go, there's an idea, sort of ideas born. interest really gets like sort of like drives the next part into going from idea into like sort of actual sort of you get a skeleton structure. You know, you have an idea of what it is you actually want, how you want it to look. The next part where you go from skeleton structure, like sort of a little bit more sort of fixed as an idea, turning that into something more concrete. That's where input comes in. I think this is where I know it's said in another episode of the podcast where Nick's not necessarily good. You need a driver. You need someone to drive.
What in terms
like,
of what you're talking about?
In terms of Kesha, I think I heard it in another episode.
But 100%, it's what we said in our previous episode.
Yeah.
Having two pistons, you know, like having someone when I'm not going, Matthew is, and when he's not going, I'm going. You know, and like have absolutely.
What happens when you're both not going?
Then get your ways.
Then
We haven't come to that point yet, but I think we're good for now.
So that's interesting, and I'm going to talk on that. Like to answer.
Go on.
So it required a driver, and this is where I was happy to come in because you know, again, I think that desire to sort of create something and have some sort of legacy came in. And I was like happy to drive and did, you know.
You did.
So really found the perfect space, got the prerequisites, registered as an independent practice, sort of filled out the space, got the assets, everything. How that part worked with regards to like financial structure was sort of equal partnership in this regard. With regards to
Momzo?
Yeah.
Nice. Suppose you didn't screw her. 70-30.
Could have.
Paid for medical school. It should have been 70-30 the other way.
Sorry, we weren't trying to shoot too high. We we're trying to turn this into. We weren't trying to like build a hospital. You know, we're trying to like just like run a small little practice. The expenses weren't too high necessarily at all, and we got it. We created it. It was there.
Wow.
A practice just down the road from where my mother's house actually is. So it would have been
It's
very
super
ideal.
convenient as well.
And I think just for the sake of like sort of explaining the line here, I'll answer the questions later. But like we created this, and one thing that's required, like, you know, sort of like after creating a business is like focused and like you need a little bit of grit to stick through.
Man.
Like and
It's everything.
and where things sort of changed is we had just gotten off the ground, had like sort of just started to like service people.
You were actually servicing people?
We got to serve like really like a handful of people. Interest shifted, or at least interest became more clear.
How do you say
Who's interest?
I would say it both. So
Yes.
certainly in both parts.
Okay.
It started with my mother's interest.
Yes.
I think she realized that the undertaking of what it would mean with regards to going, like having some sort of business endeavor with regards to input is not going to be sort of easy, like especially in the beginning. It requires a lot of grit, very tedious.
This is so interesting. So what I was going to say is that like as doctors, you get paid pretty well anyway, right? Whether you own your own business or not.
Yeah.
But if you were a plumber
In South Africa, by the way.
It's in South Africa. If you were a plumber working for a plumbing business, you would probably not get paid that well. But if you started your own plumbing business, then you can kill it. But but maybe the administration, like in terms of the money you bring in as a doctor working for someone else versus a doing your own thing is actually probably not worth that administration.
I would say literally exactly that. It like almost goes the other way, where it feels like your input is not going to yield like anything, and probably not for a while.
Sure.
You know, so a little bit difficult there, and then sort of became very clear to me in answering your question with regards to interest shifted. I can't say shifted is a little bit sort of generous. I think it just became more clear. The desire was there, but there was a little bit of a shortfall in exploring how much or how strong that desire actually was. You know, an idea was born, but while the desire was there, it wasn't enough to sort of stick.
Get you through the hard hurdle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that
happens,
sort of,
right?
and I said that started on my mother's side. When that became clear, my experience of it was sort of going off of that. Yeah, like if I'm going to be the driver here and like the sole driver, I can't do that. Like,
I need you.
Exactly,
I need
it's
you to
supposed
be
to be
with
partnership.
me.
And very clearly, became very clear to me that that's what it was probably going to look like. Became very complex for me to see that for myself, especially if long term I wanted to go and specialize.
Yeah.
If I had a total sort of path shift.
Fair.
So I discussed it a little bit, sort of discussed like what it really is we wanted, appreciated the idea, but also came to like very early on, which I'm very grateful for, the reality that this wasn't a sensible sort of endeavor.
Oh.
And
you said not sensible. That's
not
quite a big
not sensible.
allegation.
Sensible is probably very strong. Not a wise
60 minutes
endeavor.
of here.
Not a wise endeavor if the interest isn't
Got
there
it.
absolutely from both of us.
Yes.
So we rolled back.
Which is an amazing thing to do, right? It didn't take you 10 years to get in there. You lost focus. You now too far into it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I did. I was worried about that, like sort of creating something that you're pouring into that isn't really turning into more.
So I guess it's probably quite a good, like, story or like a, analogy for picking the right partner.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back. Even your mom could be the person that's not really suited for what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get to.
I mean, I would say it. I would actually paint it in a different way.
Oh, would you?
I would. Yeah, I would say that it's quite a positive story of we tried something. It was maybe didn't work out, but it was a great idea to. I mean, we keep on saying 2025 is try and fail year.
Yes,
so like, and I suppose you guys didn't fail. It was just like let's just not carry on with this and do our own thing.
But I think the point of like partnership still stands because I think if Shaun had someone who was maybe a bit more on your level in their career trajectory, had that gusto, that spring in their step, you may have gone a little longer than you did initially. In the steps, where I'm sure your mom's also like, mate, I've put in like 15 years. Let me just coast into the
rich.
twilight.
That was exactly it. Of course, my experience of it is, I imagine that, but I thought we discussed that. So it's sort of
exactly. That's a bit of a bummer. Yeah.
But again, I think if it was someone a little bit more like similar in like where we are in trajectory wise, it wouldn't have been difficult to motivate or galvanize. To galvanize a bit more. So the second she was there, I understood it. It wasn't even like a sort of like there wasn't any breakdown or anything. It was
it's kind of like fair enough, mate.
So we like sort of just like identified it very early and just rolled back, like
that's
sort of
that's
like
smart.
very quickly,
it's so
like,
smart.
just closed off the idea, sold off, like sort of lost very little money, like in the
That's
entire
beautiful.
endeavor.
Amazing.
You know what? And I think there's virtue in realizing that some endeavors don't have to be fed. I think there's wisdom in understanding that you need to draw a line in the sand at times. And I think a lot of people have the pride or the ego that says, I created this idea, I did this thing, therefore I'm going to see it to the bitter end. And sometimes there's wisdom in saying, you know what? I see the writing on the wall. Let me pay it back before I go too far and lose a lot more than I could initially. So I think...
But what's incredible to that point is that Shaun is 45. No, I'm joking. He's 32. As a callback really. Yeah. So didn't land. But I mean, you've learned those lessons so early on. Right? Yeah. You've learned those lessons on starting a business. So young. Yeah. So it's not like you're going to lose those lessons. You can take them forward, and then maybe there's another opportunity where you could start.
No doubt.
Certainly. I think that's one thing I've taken from this is, and I think, like you said, not so sure about like calling it a failure. I'm not like I think like as a business idea that did fail. Like there was some like, sort of shortcoming. I'm like not afraid of that. Do you know how much lesson I gained from that, though? Sort of understanding what the shortfall was, what was missing. That's something I can take forward.
World's knowledge.
Into anything I need
Phenomenal.
to do.
I mean, Evander's stories about, the previous two businesses that you started led you to start now.
How do we always end up in my failures?
No, but I'm kidding. Paint this positive picture.
I'm kidding.
Because it's phenomenal. You learn from those ones.
Exactly.
It's great ideas. They didn't quite land. I think you could probably set up two of those businesses in the UK and they would probably go quite well. But now you've learned so much to do now and exactly.
Failure is like compiling a scrapbook that provides you with a blueprint to the next thing. That's all it is, really.
It was such a great analogy, but I didn't know where you were going. It went to the end, but I was like the scrapbook to get to a blueprint, to get to the structure, the right lane to the... Yeah, no, but that was good.
Do you have a next thing?
Do I have a next thing? That's an awesome question. Thanks. So right now, no. But I think the way I could see this sort of applying in the way of next thing is... I have this desire to specialize, right? I think the academic calling is still there for me.
Internal medicine.
Specialize.
Internal medicine.
Inside the stuff.
Yes. It's like the more sort of refined version of what I'm doing
House.
now. Like
a
lot more specialized. A lot more intricate.
Seriously, do you know House?
Yes.
The show.
He lives in a house.
No.
Oh my
I'm joking.
goodness.
Okay. That character is an internal medicine specialist.
Okay.
So it's
like
organs and stuff.
Yeah, it's really just the more refined version of what I'm doing. Yeah, organs and stuff.
Yes.
Like
doesn't sound that hard at all.
This is very rudimentary, but it's essentially medicine without like the sort of operating element. You know, like surgical specialists do that sort of thing.
You poke around.
It's very rudimentary how I'm explaining it, but I think that's the way you need to.
It's pretty much the most knowledgeable version of a doctor you can get.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That desire's there, you know. So I think that's the first focal point. And the next thing, then, to answer your question, producer, is then go into private practice in that regard, and you know, sort of taking the lessons that I've gained here and establishing and creating my own practice. Then, like, you know, like I've learned a lot. You know, I know exactly where like the shortfalls were, and I think I have a much better understanding of how I want that to look. Yeah.
Wow.
What a question. I want to pitch you an idea.
Right now.
Yeah.
Elevator pitch, go.
So, you know, people are very anxious about cancer because everyone, like 50% of people get cancer, right?
50% of people get cancer?
Like 1 in 2 people get cancer at some stage.
It's a wild stat.
We'll get to the stats. I want you to pitch.
But this is what I'd use.
Can you search that?
This is what I'd use in the PR.
Or Matt, whoever's more efficient.
In the press release. But what you do is you set up a cancer screening center that checks for like every kind of cancer, right? So you've got all the funny machines, whatever, and then you set that up in a very wealthy neighborhood, and then you do PR campaigns in that neighborhood talking about 1 in 2 people get cancer. You should get checked for cancer today. By the way, you can at this shop here, and it costs like 50 gazillion pounds to go for a checkup. But you target it at like ultra wealthy people. You do one in like Monaco, Knightsbridge, somewhere fancy in New York that I don't know the name of. But you know what I mean? You do it like that, and then you just have these like hardcore cancer screening centers. I think that would
that's a pretty good idea, actually.
Yeah.
So I love that idea.
So wait, you should fact check Nick.
Yeah.
Yes.
UK, 1 in 2 people get cancer. And then World Health Organization says globally, 1 in 5. So that means, shit, I need to get the fuck out of here.
Something in the world. It's not a lime scale in the world.
Yeah, it's a stress.
Yeah. So I know this is not the nature of the podcast. I don't want to get too technical about it, but cancer is a very broad set of diagnoses. It's one kind of sort of disease, and it's sort of and how they form cancers. Like, that's why that name is really there. But it's a broad set of diagnoses, and full on, like, all cancer screening, as you described it, would require a lot of sort of testing modalities, a lot of sort of very expensive equipment.
But if we say we're testing for like the top 50 kind, right? And we've got a machine for every one of those.
I think you should do this idea. I think you stop backtracking.
Yeah.
Do it.
And just do it.
Great idea.
Don't rush, though. I told you what happens when you like sort of rush an idea into inception.
It's production.
Fair enough.
No, I think that's a great idea. I think Shaun should do it. I think Shaun, you being on this pod has given me so much joy and happiness.
So good to see your face
So glad
again.
to be
So
here.
good to see
Thanks
you.
for having me. Yeah.
And now hopefully you listen to it.
Yeah.
I'm
gonna watch one episode.
One episode.
No,
thank you.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, guys. You know, I've watched like.
No, I know.
episodes.
We're just taking a piss. We love you. Thank you so much for your time. And let's go have some fun in London town.
Yeah.
Lovely, man.
Let's do it, bro.
We'll see you guys next week.
Love you.